Doo-doo-doo.
I do got some place to be at 2 a.m. So
let's get going. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome, universe, to another episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. And oh my God, we have a mystery guest this week. We have somebody from the Masquerade. How's it going, mystery guest?
It's okay, man. I'll spare the suspense, man. It's me. What's going on?
Oh my God, no names, no names.
Well, just like our, humble protagonist, wherever the hell he is, pretty naive and dumb, and kind of walk into things. So that was not planned out. I was hurting my eyes.
Well, everybody, if you don't know already, if you didn't read the title, tonight we're going to be talking about 1999 Stanley Kubrick film Eyes Wide Shut, his final movie. He actually delivered the final cut of the film 4 days before he died. Well, allegedly the final cut of the film. We don't know. Yeah, so this is our first episode back in a couple weeks. So thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for Big Paul coming back strong.
Absolutely.
He's the only one that likes
all that Christmas stuff, man.
He's the only one that will talk to me about movies.
Watch things, man. It's been good.
Yeah, Paul's the only one that will talk to me about movies. Everybody just thinks I'm annoying. So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I got fucking MGTOWs coming after me. I've got Tim Pool fans coming at me all the time.
Well, I don't want to get too off topic, man, but what's that MGTOW shit all about?
MGTOW, well, it kind of a little bit dovetails thematically, I suppose, into some of the concepts of Eyes Wide Shut. But basically, MGTOW stands for Men Going Their Own Way, which is like they kind of put aside notions of marriage and having wives, and they just want to be men and be masculine and don't want to be pulled down by like the feminine culture, I suppose. Most guys that go MGTOW either are guys that have usually suffered like a really bad divorce or something like that and have got really fucked over. So they take that kind of limited perspective and they project that onto just women in general. And it sends them kind of away. And then they develop kind of this weird, basically chauvinistic or misogynistic perspective on just women as in total. And then they just kind of identify that. It becomes their like singular identity. Like, oh, we're MGTOWs. Like we don't interact with like this like feminine culture. Like we don't want that. Granted, there's a lot of hypocrisy involved. I've just started kind of learning a lot about it in the past year, and then in the past few months, just because I need things to watch when I do live streams by myself, I started kind of diving a little bit into MGTOW culture. I found it kind of fascinating. Just, as an intellectual exercise. Not that of course, it's been a joke between me and my wife for like years, like gonna go MGTOW. Me and Foster are gonna go MGTOW. But
the people that identifies with an acronym and probably are not down with sweet mask and boas.
Actually, they would be down with that world. That's like the hedonism of the wealthy and the objectification of I guess women and just sexuality in general as kind of a method of power and expression of your control and your power. That's kind of plays into a little bit of the subtext of Eyes Wide Shut. But but those every once in a while somebody will drop me a message or leave a comment on a video or something. And the other day I got called like a beta cuck or something like that.
Yeah, yep. Man. I don't know. There's just so much. I feel like such an old man sometimes. Like when I was reading that thing you posted, someone commented on your nightcap video. Mm-hmm. Like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And then I'm like, all right, let me go on with my day. But I don't know.
I'm beta, dude. I ain't no alpha.
Yeah. And host with air quotes. Sorry.
Well, that's which isn't fair, right? Because technically, even if I was a bad one, I'm still the host of the show. So right. I take umbrage with that.
Yeah, but I think acknowledging a formal title of a show gives you some type of validity. I don't know if that's where he's going for, but then again, I don't know anything.
Well, he didn't watch it. He's like, I'm gonna watch this later. So I'm hoping I get more comments.
Yeah, it's like,
And he also, I mean, look forward to this, folks, on a future nightcap. That guy has a YouTube channel. And apparently, from what I've gleaned so far, is that his story is that he went MGTOW, moved to Vietnam,
oh,
and found a more traditional kind of male female cultural norms that he appreciated, and shacked up with a young Vietnamese girl.
yeah, okay, nice.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna go through, watch some
Yeah,
of his vlogs.
on the side of it, it's just for like me, like a learning experience for me and intellectual exercise for you. Maybe do a nightcap on that. We just watch his videos and you can explain this big towel thing to me. And
Yes, as soon as you as soon as you get a laptop, buddy, we're gone. We're going.
yeah, yeah, I gotta buy that. My son stole mine.
I know
Son's,
your sons will always. My son almost broke mine, so there you go. And
yeah,
he'll steal mine at someday. You know, he'll steal mine.
indeed. Hey, speaking of nightcaps, and before we get into this, man, what are you sporting tonight?
This is actually something you had recommended a while back. You've had it a few times. Whistle
Oh,
pig, piggyback, 100% rye, age 6 years. Yeah, I saw it when I was at the store. I was just like, you know what? I got a credit card. Those fools should have never upped my limit.
It's spicy, right? Even for a rye.
Ooh, yeah, it's because it's a little, like, even for a rye, it's a little, the alcohol content is even a little higher. It's like 48.28 rather than just 46. Usually you'll see like 46, right? And it you can taste it. It's got a little bite to it. It's sweet though. I like it. Because I like that. The thing about the rye is, like, I enjoy the kind of the flavor profile. I like the spice.
Mm-hmm. A lot of pepper.
It's
I'm
like,
from a fine distillery in Vermont too.
it's like
Nice spirit there.
it's like drinking Captain Morgan's, but I'm not a bitch. You know what I mean? Not a stupid bitch.
I'm like, last week I was splurged and was drinking a Glenlivet 12 year, but
Ooh.
I'm get back onto the rye. So I got a Basil Hayden.
Oh, I've seen that actually. I've seen that in the stores. It's good.
So yeah, well, I got the dark rye. They do a bourbon as well, but the dark rye is spliced with port. So there's a bit of a sweetness that kind of cuts into the typical spices of rye that we're just talking about, like with the piggyback. So it's I wouldn't say it's my favorite rye, but it's definitely a good one to change up every now and then. If you're
What
getting
would you
into
s- what would you say is your favorite rye? Do you have like a go-to, like a one that you're just like find yourself going back to more often than not?
for with rye, well, so the piggyback, not piggyback, but Whistling Pig 10 year is probably my favorite rye, but that's too pricey to be a regular one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I basically Bullet Rye, Templeton. Like I kind of go to those a lot.
Yeah,
The
bullets solid.
piggyback's it's a nice one. I think after you finish that first ball, you wouldn't be ready to get back into another one. You'd probably want to break, but yeah, probably Templeton's, man.
I also really like the High West, the double rye. I really like that. That's a very smooth rye.
Yeah, it is my Mormon juice.
Yeah, because
But
I actually have bought in several bottles of that.
yeah, anything comes out of that distillery, even their bourbons, they're pretty solid.
I tried the bourbon, the one that you had. I think last time we talked, you have the American Prairie bourbon.
Yeah,
I tried it. Not my favorite. Not my favorite. But I think part of that is just like I think I'm a rye man. I think this is where I'm landed. You know.
yeah, man. No, it's good. But I'm telling you, every now and then you gotta change it up with like single malt Scotch or a traditional Irish whiskey. Just to change it up. Just change it up.
Well, last thing I had was Jameson. That's the last thing I like before I opened this bottle. It was Jameson.
Mm.
And Jameson's okay. You know, it's like not, especially once you go out and you have some more like expensive ones and stuff. You're like, Jameson's, it's all right. It's whatever. I do like some of their like special edition ones, like the IPA Castmates one is pretty good.
Yeah.
What else have I had? I've actually years and years and years ago. Paul and I went to a liquor store. We bought $100 bottle of Jameson, and we were kind of just like, nah, well,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, well, I do that with my wife all the time, where I'll get like a $20 bottle of Malbec, and then I'll get like a $50 bottle one, and then I won't even tell her that. And this happened last week. I did it with a couple of cabs, and she made such a fuss over the $20 one, and like the $45, $50 one is around that range. She's like, "Oh, this is good. This tastes." I'm just like, "Yeah, they're like what the fuck?" But that's how it goes sometimes.
Well, you know what they call that, Paul? They call that an unrefined palate. You know, she's not classy enough to enjoy it, Paul. I mean, this is how you tell the difference between class and trash.
Mm. Well, let me tell you what, man. Like on the Scotch, like remember I said you had Shoulder Monkey and
Yeah.
like you knock out like a third or a quarter of that bottle in a night, like you're going to feel it in the morning. It's going to linger in your brain. But knock out the same amount of like a Glenlivet 12-year, like you feel fine. And so that's that's one of my gauges of quality.
100%. Though, I mean, but that's true because it's how it's distilled, how much like sugar and additives are in it. Like, you know, that is like when you start getting the higher top shelf stuff, like you realize like, oh, I don't wake up feeling like garbage, even if I have a little bit too much to drink. Like I can function like a normal person.
Exactly.
You know, if you get drunk off a Jim Beam, you're just like, whoa, for like 2 days.
It's a lingering process, man.
Yeah. Oh, nothing worse than the boxed whiskey. Let me tell you what, dude, that boxed stuff I had.
Hey, you got to make do, man. You got to make do. Sometimes it's, better than nothing.
And just like men in whiskey, sometimes you have to make do with relationships. And today we're going to be talking about Eyes Wide Shut.
Nice segue. Nice segue. Beautiful.
Eyes Wide Shut is the last film of Stanley Kubrick. Like I said before, it's written by Stanley Kubrick and a guy called Frederick Raphael, adapted from an Arthur Schnitzler book called Tram Novelle, or Rhapsody, A Dream Story, if you're English. He's an Austrian Jewish guy.
Yep.
Very controversial author of his time. This was his bag. Paul and I both read the book and watched the movie, so we'll be able to compare and contrast. But as is tradition with a lot of Kubrick stuff, it's pretty faithful to the book. It is pretty much the book. Kubrick adds like his Kubrickian layers to this to kind of elevate the material, I think, a little bit. It makes it a little bit more about what he wants it to be about sometimes. But I do think the essence of the book and the themes of the book are pretty much the same. I mean, yeah. Almost to the point where it was like, because I've seen Eyes Wide Shut so many times, like I was really bored reading the book because I've seen the movie so many times. I was just like, this is almost beat for beat. Like the structure of the novella is the structure of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think you've had a faithful adaptation to anything like this since A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Yeah.
It's just pretty straightforward to that, but I don't know, just like the classic Kubrick opening, somewhere then goes in with a waltz, right? It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Barry Lyndon opening, like when it gets into it, and then
I think.
But I'm sorry, go for it.
No. I mean, I was going to say, I think there's actually some thematic connections to Barry Lyndon. They have like with your main character, Bill Hartford and Barry Lyndon, there is a similar sense about their kind of journey and their passiveness as characters. But
with like Kubrick's like a dark, like, shoot, like you're just feeling like, remember we talked with Barry Lyndon where it felt like, a Discovery Channel, or we're just like observing, and there's just kind of a lot like, you definitely felt like that, more so like in this case, like within Barry Lyndon, I felt there.
Yeah, because Barry Lyndon has the natural beauty of the world that is taking place that kind of adds like a texture and almost a warmth to it that he's not creating. Whereas in something like Eyes Wide Shut, it is very much classic Kubrick in the sense that it's very intellectual and cinematic, but very distant and cold. In fact, if I were to have a criticism of the movie, I think that would be my main criticism. It's really hard to engage with these characters. Even when you sometimes, I think, recognize yourself, like intellectually, you understand like what's going on and what is pulling them to a certain degree. But it's hard to give a fuck about these people at all. And the fact that the movie is itself not the most pleasant experience to sit through, Whereas something like he got away with it with other movies, like he got away with it in Clockwork Orange, also mostly repellent characters. Um, but it's fun. It's a fun movie. Like like Malcolm McDowell, Alex is an enigmatic actor. He's a great. It's a great lead performance. Barry Lyndon, you have kind of the beauty of the landscape. The Shining, you have Jack Nicholson
Yep.
being crazy to anchor it. Full Metal Jacket, you have kind of the absurdity and the satire of what's going on and the way that movie unfolds. Whereas Eyes Wide Shut is, to me, in my opinion, his coldest movie and maybe his most unsuccessful to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, how had you ever seen this before watching
So
it?
yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I only fast forward to the nudie parts when we were kids. I never watched this movie through.
Yeah.
So like when I read the book, I was like, huh, so this was going on. I'm like, and then the whole time I'm just thinking about like, well, is he going to take this, like what's Kubrick going to do with this, But I could definitely pick up as I was reading through the book, and because the book takes place so is in Austria in the 1920s, and then movies in New York in the 90s. But the theme is there, and I actually saw like a fun article with was it Raphael, the guy he enlisted to help him write the screenplay.
Yeah, Frederick Raphael, who they had a very contentious working relationship.
Yeah, but at least the quote that was like captured in the article is talking about is like, well, do you think things have changed basically 100 years ago from that? And Kubrick's like, I don't think so in terms of subject material with people. And I just thought that was just really interesting because it was so faithful to the book written almost 100 years ago, and they took place in the night, which is like 20 some years ago now at this point, and
Yeah.
it's still what I mean. And it's people are people; they don't change.
Exactly. It's the same reason why you can read Shakespeare and it still works. Like the human drama still works. People are universally kind of the same. Like we haven't actually progressed that far when we really are honest with ourselves in terms of like how we engage with the world, how we engage with each other. We are all kind of motivated by the same things that we were hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so like it actually probably would have been more visually interesting. I was thinking when I was watching it this time, like if it had been a period piece, but it wasn't. So
No.
okay, so I gave you a little preview into what I think about it. I have much more, I guess, complicated thoughts about the movie. But when you watched the movie and you read the book, like, did you like the movie? Did you enjoy the experience? Did you get anything out of it, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, well, getting out of it. So I mean, like I always enjoy like watching it. I Kubrick film not for the first time, but the second or third time to just kind of like dig into it because he's never on the surface, and that's why we been talking to fanboying about his movies for 8 months now, right? I think as far as his body of work and everything that we watched up to this point, I think it's probably my least favorite Kubrick film.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad at all. I don't think it's his greatest contribution to the cinematic universe, but I definitely think it's good. And what's funny is I think the first time I watched it, I remember just thinking like, Cruise, like Tom Cruise, like love Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, you throw him in any action movie, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch it. I just remember watching, just like, oh God, he's such a bad guy. But the more I think about it, I'm like, man, actually, he was perfectly cast for this role and this type
He,
of personality
yes,
for
yeah.
Bill Hartman, because in the novel, his friends like Frederick or uh, it doesn't matter what
Fridolin, Fridolin,
Friedel, yeah,
Fridolin,
yeah, Kidman would be like Abilene. He was married to Abilene.
Albertina or Abilene. Yeah.
But either way, I think he was way more annoying in the book than Cruise was in the film, which is kind of impressive. Well, yeah, definitely in a way, but the book was just kind of like too on the nose, I think, with a lot of the feelings. So I definitely enjoyed the film more than the book.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed like reading something that was 100 years ago that doesn't sound too like old people.
No, it actually felt very contemporary. Like it
Yeah,
was more contemporary than like when we read Barry Lyndon. Like Barry Lyndon does feel like it is from a time, it is kind of discussing a specific time, even though there are universal kind of themes that like, in terms of human drama that play out in the story, this one felt contemporary. Like you could have taken this story just like Kubrick did, and you put it in the '90s, and you do the same story, and it still has the same effect. And actually, you
Right.
didn't even have to change it very much at all. I would say, like, the difference between Fridolin and Bill Harford is that I think Fridolin is more like openly masculine and tough in the book, more aggressive, where Bill Harford is kind of a classic Kubrick protagonist in that he's kind of a passive dude, kind of passive, kind of a simp,
Kind
a
of like
cuck.
what that guy call you, a beta, whatever. Yeah,
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 beta male.
that's what he is. That's
But
what he
he
is. But
wants,
no,
but he sees himself and he wants to be the other thing. Like he wants to be. He's always looking for, and this is one of the layers of the film that I think is also in the novel, but more so in the Kubrick thing is this idea of kind of the opulent libertine nature of like high society, where they can have anything they want. Doesn't matter. People like lavish homes, fucking wild midnight orgies where everybody's dresses up like they're in a cult. Like they can do those things because everything has access to them. And Bill is always trying to kind of emulate that behavior. That's why we see throughout the movie he's always like he's spending money. He's just buying people, just buying
mm,
shit, buying his way through the movie. Like because he
yeah,
wants to emulate that behavior so that he could also be it.
yeah.
Which is
Well, the other thing he does throughout the movie is reassure everybody he comes in contact with that he is a doctor. It shows his
yes,
too,
but
right? It says something like to his character that he's very insecure, and then we see it also become very naive, and in addition to being pompous and snobby, right? Like his arrogance and like he had his whole like self perception and his perception of the world was so constructed with his mind that like when he gets like a like just like one hard truth from his stone wife, in a heated moment, it shatters his whole world, which spins him off into this whole like
mm-hmm.
journey. He went to go chase the quote unquote the end of the rainbow, right? And so and as he progresses through this like a journey, he keeps getting more like he keeps getting more scandalized by more hard truths and just completely continues to get shattered. And then and inevitably when his millionaire patient, Ziegler, basically big boys him and then sends him back home with his tail between his legs to where he just decides, okay, I'm done. It's very much like a little kid that, snuck out of the house to go down to where his parents told him, don't go by yourself, gets scared and comes back, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like, like a like what Kubrick said in reference to like a 2001 interview. And he's just like, no, you don't say it out loud, then it's stupid. Everything's got to be dramatized, right? And so that's essentially what happened a lot, like on the surface level. It's just like I am this image I have of myself. Here's who I am. I have all these things, and then as soon as you get it straight, so like just a fragile, like naive, like man, the idea of what we think one is, and then as soon as that gets challenged, it just completely spiral them out of control.
Yeah, he has a perception of himself that's almost built on like a classical archetype. Like even when he's talking to Nicole Kidman and they have that conversation where she reveals like her secret fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like she's like, well, why do you trust me? He's like, because you're my wife, and I can trust my wife. You're the mother of my daughter.
Yeah.
Like I know you, I can trust you. And he's and this is another part of the kind of the subtext of the movie is this when it comes to relationships and sexuality is that when you're together with somebody for a long time, it's easy to take them for granted. It's easy to otherize them in a sense. You look at them as a monolith, the mother, the wife, and without really kind of respecting the fact that they're probably more similar to you. Because everybody has their secret fantasy life and whatever. Like acknowledging just a person's base humanity on a primal level. It's like you can be married and stuff and still see somebody and be like, well, I find that person attractive or whatever. You watch porno, you're not watching ugly people. Like, and sometimes I think we maybe can deny those kind of things in our partners' lives. Like we don't see them as having the same feelings we do sometimes. And it's easy to, and when you're in a,
Yeah,
what's
you don't want to see it. You don't want to acknowledge
yeah,
it.
and when you're in a long-term relationship, I think that just exacerbates just because you get into the kind of your normal mode, and you kind of have like sort of a perception of what you want the other person to be and vice versa. And sometimes you like their humanity can be lost on you to a certain degree. And I think that is kind of part of what the movie and also the book is. I think more so the book is like really about. It's really about this idea of the importance of communication in a relationship, and even when you have to talk about things that make you uncomfortable to the other person, expressing like fantasies or desires or whatever. And that's kind of the coda of the film by the time you get to the end of the movie, and like Nicole Kidman's character has the final word in the movie where he's like, there's one thing we need to do, and he's like, what's that? She says, fuck, because she wants to bring her fantasy life into her marriage, because if she doesn't, she's worried that she'll wander. So she has to reignite like this passion that she has for, or this desire that she has, but she has to do it with her husband. And she gets there faster than he does. He kind of, like, the movie is like all the time is like underlining the idea that like Bill is really trying to find his wife and all these other people, like in the way Kubrick kind of constructed it, because all of them are redheads. They all have a passing resemblance to Nicole Kidman. They all have similar behaviors that she also exhibits as well, like being flirtatious, doing drugs to a certain extent, the kind of a despondentness, and then also the secret side in terms of wanting to be kind of naked sexually, like in terms of like in a meta sense, not like literally, but and I think that's really the journey of Bill, and she gets there in a much more direct way. Like he doesn't know what to do with all that, like all those feelings and stuff, because he's really out there searching. He's trying to get back at her. He's trying to feel empowered, because she, like you said, like she shattered his ego, like his frail male ego, whatever you want to call it, and that's just something that the movie is kind of always underlining with the people that he comes into contact with. I would say even like after they have their fight or whatever, and they're stoned, and he has to go to his patient's house who has just passed away. And he goes and he talks to the daughter who like reveals that she's secretly in love with him.
Yep.
Even though she already has like a boyfriend, and just so happens to look just like Tom Cruise. And she looks like Nicole Kidman. So what he realizes in that moment, he's like, fuck. Somebody could step out on you. Somebody could like have a secret desire that they feel unfulfilled and express it in reality. It could leave fantasy, and it kind of devastates them. I think I think the scene right after that, he's like in the cab, just like fucking staring while he's envisioning his wife having sex with the sailor.
Yeah. And then immediately after that, just getting bumped into by the drunken hooligans walking by, which sends him a cafe. But yeah, that's yeah. See, I didn't catch Bill Hartford internalizing that realization with his patient's daughter in there in that point. So that's an interesting thought,
because it makes it real. Like he just had this conversation with his wife, made him feel uncomfortable, but he's kind of like,
because that's like what spirits it off. He's like, where he uses this term, but like mansplaining his wife about what women feel and what they don't feel, and she's saying, you're full of shit, right? Sex is the last thing on their mind when they're being treated, and then he goes to a patient and speaking to the patient's daughter, and then boom, like whoa, she's right about that, and just kind of progressing and out of control. So. And then
dude, that the fight that they have when they're smoking pot, I was like, I understand, like it's got kind of a a moviness to it, but I was like, man, that shit like fucking rang really true. I was like that in a lot of ways, like in a metaphorical sense. I was like, that's like one of the realest fights I've ever seen in a movie, because that's kind of how they go, where you make an assumption about how somebody must feel, and then they correct you, and you get indignant about it. Because you're like, how could you think that way? What are you talking about? And they're like, because that when Nicole Kidman's live reading of "Oh, if you men only knew," like sends a chill down my fucking spine. Because it's a reminder that like it's too often. I think women do this as well. Calm down, MGTOWs. I think like you just take each other for granted in that way, and you just make assumptions about how the other person feels, and that was in a weird way, in its own way. I guess a kind of a powerful moment for me as a viewer, especially somebody that's like been in a long term relationship and been married. I just really was like, yeah, that's kind of how those fights go. Usually, actually, a little bit more animated than that, but
Yeah. Yeah, they do, but that's like part of like his persona, right? And like he's well structured, put together guy, has everything, and he's controlling. Like even when he meets Nick Nightingale, the pianist, right, that ends up getting them into the secret society. Like when he greets them, he's like very like aggressively patting them on the back, holding his hand, grabbing him, stuff like that. Like
yeah.
and what he interacts with, he has like there's like this possessive quality about him.
Which there's interesting parallels to that with the idea of like who is on the kind of the hierarchy and where you sit with it, right? Because Bill can go over to Nick Nightingale and emasculate him to a certain degree, right? Because of his status as a doctor, because they find out that Nick Nightingale was also in med school and drops out to become a pianist, and he's like overly aggressive. But then when you look at like say Ziegler treats Cruz that way, and Cruz turns into a little boy. And then that gets even more intense by the time he gets to the mass ball, where he gets exposed and he just
Mm-hmm.
looks like a scared child, right?
Uh,
Like, so it's just these constant layers. Like, the movie has so many, everything in the movie that happens is like, it's like an echo of the last thing you saw, but it's like the more intense version of it. And it just kind of goes up until the end,
yeah.
you know?
No, absolutely, absolutely. But I do want to point out one thing that I thought was interesting. Might be like a little 287, but I just thought with the apartment structure in their room. So when they're in there, it's very like tiny. Like their room is very tiny, very not a lot of substance. It's kind of mundane, compact, right? You just go into the bathroom or the first thing where they get ready. Like the toilet's right in front of the sink. It's very jam packed, and then they get ready, and then they had that nice like cut scene where he pauses the waltz, and then they go out by it. And as soon as they get in the hallway, it's a beautiful, lavish hallway. It goes right into the big living room, and everything is grand and all that. Where the babysitter and the daughter are and stuff, and then they go off, off into the party and stuff like that. And so you think about, like in the bedroom, that's your place of like intimacy and like your very private place. And how does a private place, compare to the rest of the home, right? And so they're enterprise, which is big sublayer of the film, like how do we on the surface connect it, work on our intimacy, right? And
Yeah.
so in the spot, like in their home, it's very mundane, cramped, and not just not a lot of substance, not even a lot of lighting in there. So I
No, I think you're onto something there because if you think about like even your own life, right? Like what do we do in our own homes, right? We project who we want people to think we are in our living room. But
yeah,
then our bedrooms are our bedrooms. That's who we really are. And there's clothes all over the floor and bullshit but that's probably
mm-hmm.
closer to who our actual personality is. So I think that you're onto something there and I also think that it's when you think about it in that way, and you start thinking about the relationship that Cruz and Kidman have in the movie, is that uh, that's not a place you're supposed to be able to be yourself, right? You're supposed to be able to walk around naked, you do whatever, your most vulnerable, comfortable place, and
Right.
that's why I think that's why that conversation happens in the bedroom. But also, they are not honest with each other, and they haven't been for a long time. It would seem, right? So
Right.
there's this kind of deep into the core of who they are as people. They're living this kind of double life, and
Mm-hmm.
not tangibly. They're not actually doing anything, but in their desires, in their heart, of
Yeah.
what they want. Like they are not being honest with each other until that moment.
Right there from the get-go, like they just like complete kind of disregard for each other, right there in their most intimate spot in the house. She's obviously in the bathroom in the midst, like you actually see her freaking like wipe up the finish, and she's asking how does she look, like as she's literally like wiping herself, right? And just not like no privacy, nothing like I own you and all this. There's all kinds of ways you can like read into that. Going in there, like, how do I look? Is this blah blah? And I've acknowledged yes, 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 and turn around. No, you always look beautiful. All right, let's move, and then like let's get out of there. So just right from the get go, and then even before that, right before the opening title, Eyes Wide Shut happens, right, and like you can infer that it's from a dream story when Eyes Wide Shut, another like reference to dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally went to that, but it's just that's how you're opening up with him, just like eyes wide shut, going in there. She's obviously going to the bathroom and like talking to you, and you're just like,
Well, because it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to reflect the idea of like that's how couples are.
Mm.
You know, that's how couples are. You're just like you know, you got to take a piss, okay?
Yeah,
But we're still talking or whatever. Like
something. But even before the title of the film comes on, like what do you see? You see Kidman's ass. Like she takes off the sexy black dress, still wearing her heels out there, and then boom, eyes wide shut into that, and it's
oh, it's definitely yeah. It's sending this idea to you that this is about. I guess because there's two readings on that. Like, is that feminine power from one perspective, and then on the other hand, you could read into the movie. You could be like, well, is this an objectification? And I think the movie, especially with Kidman's character, is kind of always straddling a line of what that is. Because when you think about what happens to Bill Hartford, not to say that like you know he's super sympathetic or anything, uh, it is a reminder of like the the influence that a woman can have over a man's ego and his life by
yeah,
just kind of tweaking him a little bit. It could fucking destroy his entire worldview. What
yeah,
he thinks he has, if somebody kind of if your wife or whoever kind of infers that like there is an instability here and I have thought about other things, like that's uncomfortable, obviously, right?
yeah.
And so I think there is that playing as well in the movie. I don't think, you know, Kubrick doesn't strike me as like a, even though he's kind of the father of a lot of daughters, doesn't strike me as like a, for lack of a better word, like a feminist. I think he's more like egalitarian in the sense where he's just like, you know, everybody has a role in what they do and how they interact with people, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't shy away from the negative aspects of men. I mean, this movie
No,
you could have called it hashtag men are pigs. I mean, that's that's kind of the whole thing about it. I mean, even Cruise's character, Hartford, kind of gets paranoid about how he treats women by like I think he thinks about his daughter. There's a scene when he first comes home from that first night in the with the ball, the masquerade ball, and he comes home. The first thing he does when he gets home, he goes to make sure his daughter's okay, which I thought was interesting
yeah,
because he's seeing how he treats women, how women are treated out in this larger world and this in society or whatever you want to call it. And
mm-hmm.
I think he's a little like embarrassed maybe about it, about like
That,
his primal nature, like the primal male psyche or whatever, you know.
right. And like what I brought you into, and also I like how I treat because like you'll see because well I watch everything with subtitles on,
Mm-hmm.
and just like what like caught my eye too when they're getting ready to go. It's like do we put the phony page numbers on the refrigerator? It's like you put the phony page numbers like so they have no like they don't even want to be bothered by
Mm-hmm.
that needs to contact them for whatever, even if it's an emergency, like with their 7-year-old daughter at home, like they don't want to be bothered because why would they put phony phone numbers on there, right? And so that could have been part of him coming back there to check. Like,
Yeah.
oh no, that
No,
wasn't the
no,
on the
that wasn't
Christmas.
the party. That was the after the mass ball and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like it clues you into who they are as people. They both of them are a little shallow and
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic. The first line in the movie from Tom Cruise is, "Do you know where my wallet is?"
Mm-hmm.
And Nicole Kidman's first line is, "How do I look?"
Yep.
So it's kind of setting this paradigm of kind of like this general sense of like who they are and where their priorities are as people.
I didn't get the fast forward back to the end though, because you referenced it though. I didn't get to. I didn't take my takeaway wasn't that she's like trying to salvage or like want to inflect like her desires into like the physical manifestation of what's married into and try to like merge that. I saw it as more as like conceding to the life of complacency, where they're just like, well, we dodged a bullet there, and let's go. Because in the why choose the term fuck? It was like we need to go home and make love, and that's like no, just we're fucking. And it's very much she ended it. And if you compare like the opening, like right to the Regis here, just take off the dress, but still like wearing the heels, whatever, and then opens up the titles, and then it just wraps up. Let's fuck. We need to fuck it, and it's like just the business, the motionless, motionless sex. So no intimacy. I didn't get.
I think that is a reading. I've heard people say that as well, as in the sense that this is like a cycle they are doomed to repeat. Like that's what it means. And I used to think the same thing until like this last time I watched it. And I was really just more like, oh no, she's trying to like because there's a hey, listen everybody, listen McDowell. There's a difference between like having like deep meaningful sex and just fucking. And when you think about like a fantasy or a desire or whatever, if you think
Right.
like you're not watching porno, not to bring this up again, but you're not watching porno and watching people like tenderly make love. Like, cause it's a fantasy. It's not fucking real.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a difference to me in my mind. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive in saying that like one is meaningless and one isn't. I think like sometimes like, I don't know, you have fucking too much to drink or whatever and you just go at each other. And maybe they hadn't done that in a long time. And maybe that's like because she's having these fantasies, these primal fantasies about being fucking taken,
Mm-hmm.
and she wants that with whether she wants it or she's doing it out of a necessity. Maybe she wants to try, whatever, to rekindle something. I think it's a little bit more. I think a positive thing, as positive as a Kubrick ending
Yeah.
can be.
Well, she wanted that. You see, that's where I think wrong in like that regard, because like with the big fight that spurred off everything, she wanted a more substantive answer for why he wouldn't be unfaithful to her, other than the fact of the
Yeah,
formality of marrying, right, and
yeah.
breaking from, right, and then she wanted that, and then that didn't happen, and then it just came back, and like it's his own like admission of guilt. He went out and got big boy. The world shit. He continued to get shared. The more he discovered about the world, and that not everyone cared that he was a doctor, flinging around his credentials, right? Then he comes back. Oh, let me get back to this world, and then and at that point, it's done. So I don't know, man. But they definitely play a lot like in the psychology of the dream space, if you will. One thing I thought like was interesting, like when he goes off to chase the rainbow, if you will, right? And then where he has, because when I say the point I'm referring to is after the fight, when he goes on there, and then like and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And like what happens, right? And so he gets an opportunity with the patient's daughter to come there. Then he has the hooker Domino, um, which Vanessa pointed out that was actress from Practical Magic or some other '90s show. And I was just like, oh, I don't care. A little random factoid. So that VH1 show, a little pop-up bubble pop-up, man.
Yeah.
And then it goes on there, and then to the and then onto the orgy place, right? And then that night transpired, and he goes back, and then he goes back home. After that, just like, whoo, I feel bad. And then what happens? Nicole Kim shares her other dream that she had, this terrible dream, goes in explicit, vivid detail about all this, and basically her dream is just like
Gang rape.
cock holding him, and like in the dream, and like
Not only do that, but laugh at him.
Now I'm going to try again. And then he goes back, and then what's he do? He calls a former patient's daughter, and then husband picks up. He's like, click. I'm going to hang up. I'm going to go back to Domino's house. Like, and then he has that weird altercation where she basically is like, aggressive, but it's like, yeah, oh, you're so high. I want to get into this. And then I don't know how to tell you this, but my roommate that you were with last night tested positive for HIV.
Well, okay. Well, here's another reading on that. Okay, and I'm glad you agree that it's all Nicole Kidman's fault. Good on you. I'm just joking. That's a joke. That's a joke. No, I think like because you said like the movie has kind of this doubling. Also, this is another thing where like another parallel where he goes back through his night, but he does it in the harsh light of day, and he sees that it isn't so pretty. Like it's like he had a dream the night before, and then he went and experienced the reality of it, and the reality is not like where your inhibitions are low and your blood is hot and you're out there about to make some bad decisions, right?
Right.
And now he sees it like for what it is rather than like his fantasy. Like the night before, even though his fantasy is completely fucked up, like his dream is, because it definitely works in dream logic. It's full of coincidence and contrivance and all sorts of stuff like that in the movie.
Right.
It's the longest night ever, apparently. But I do think that there is something to that. Like, but like because she spurs him on again. Like he feels like he learned his lesson. He comes home, and then she opens this can of worms on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sends him into a spiral again. Like I love the shot of Tom Cruise when she's like confessing to him and he's sitting in bed and she's like hugging him because she's being honest. She's trying to have an honest moment. She doesn't know why she's having this dream or why she feels the way she does. She's trying to talk to her husband, trying to communicate, and he's completely like fucking despondent. Which I guess in reality, I mean, how the fuck would you feel if somebody woke up and be like, "Oh, this is this dream I had"? I'd be like, "Oh God." Well, I guess I'm going to go out and do something about it. I'm going to take my manhood back.
Right, and just another way to showcase his fragility, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, but do you think there's any credence to that idea that that's like the night is the dream, and then that next day when he goes to investigate his dreams, basically, that he finds this much harsher, darker reality. It is not the fantasy that he wanted it to be.
No, I think that's really interesting too. There's also argument that just kind of a lot of it is just kind of like a walking daydream because he's not in reality, and then like he'll have those like little moments coming in and out of consciousness. Whenever he gets back into consciousness, it's always something negative that basically makes him like kowtow back to reality.
Well, because there's always this idea that like nothing is what it seems, right? Like everything has a surface level to it, the thing that you're experiencing, and you make assumptions about, just like you do with people.
Yeah, but like what you're talking about, right? So when he goes to the rainbow, the costume shop at night, right? And then Milich,
I love that actor, actually.
Boris the Blade, right?
Yeah.
And so, which Snatch, that was a couple of years right after this one. But anyways, right? And then he's all like, belligerent at the Japanese guys, like with his daughter. Then the next morning, like when he goes to revisit in the daytime, it was very like, cold and casual, and like there's no like, so yeah, definitely a different scenario like with that. But you want to talk about Milich and like that whole
Milich. So this is like another interesting layer of the movie that also implies kind of this darker, in a way, I guess it is kind of a nod to this idea of the patriarchal society, of like in terms of like, very traditional, like feminist terms, about how men view women and their bodies as commodities. And Milich kind of represents this microcosm of a larger thing. That's why it gives Bill anxiety when he goes home and he like looks at his daughter, because you're seeing Milich is like, he has the costume store, but there's obviously something fucking weird going on in the back room. He pretends like he's outraged by it, but it's really just for leverage, and he's pimping out his daughter, which is basically the conclusion. Same thing in the book, actually. That's the same thing in the book. I think the movie actually makes it way darker and way more like creepy. Maybe it's just seeing it that makes it darker.
I think so.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of just adds, it's just another kind of these underlining of how men or what men assume a woman's role is and how they kind of maintain their house, their power. I don't know. Do you have like a specific take on it? Did you watch that Rob Ager video?
I didn't get a chance.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
I should have though. I usually really enjoy what he has to say. To me, I just thought that was another dark example for Harvard's character to like be shattered by like what he thinks is like, because how does he know about Milich anyway? Well, he doesn't know about Milich, but how does he know where to go, right? So some costume store, someone that I know that was a patient of mine, and how he's like possessive. So I'm going to go somewhere like after midnight to someone because he's my patient. I know him, and of course he'll do something for me. Of course he'll do something for me.
Yeah, because in the power structure, a doctor is above you. Yeah.
Exactly. And then he gets there and his patient's not there. Now he has Milich, Boris the Blade, this Russian guy up here. And then hardballs him. He's like, no, how you going to sweeten the deal? How will you sweeten the deal? I'll give you $100 per accident price. no, that won't work. It's like $200. Okay. And to me, maybe it's reading too much into it, but that quick snap on, paying, again shows his like naivety. Like, the guy's already answered the door and doing this like that, like, and I know you're desperate like to go do this, but you just let him like eat your lunch. You're going to give him $200 in addition to like whatever he's going to charge, right? And then just brought him in. So everyone he interacts with, I feel like sees that all over his face, that like this is, fragile, like lost little guy. Yeah, he's all smiling. He's like, oh, that's cute. He's showing us that he's a doctor. You know what that means? You're not in the hospital. Like you're not in your world right now.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of takes like from that. So whether it's like Milich or the doorman Pee Wee Herman, right? It's all about that. Like
Well,
actually,
that's actually Alan Cumming. That's not. He looks like Pee Wee Herman, but
ah,
Alan Cumming from Spy Kids. Remember Spy Kids? He's the bad
yeah,
guy.
yeah, that should totally be Pee Wee Herman. Oh, I'm going to call him. You just shouldn't correct me.
Yeah, but
But
don't.
it's like everybody that like interacts with him like initially like like wants to. I don't know.
Well, this is part of, and I briefly touched on this like when we first started. Is like this idea that Bill misidentifies power with money. He thinks he can buy his way into this world. If I just have enough money, I can do this. But it's really not about that. It's about something more sinister. They don't really. It's very nebulous in the movie. They don't really identify it. But Bill thinks, on a subconscious level, I guess in a metatextual sense, that like I can have whatever I want because I have money. I can do whatever I want because I have money. Fucking 1 o'clock in the morning, I'll get you to open the door. I'll find your price.
Mm-hmm.
Like which kind of leads also to his arrogance and, like you said, his naivete and this idea that he takes things for granted. He just assumes that his status in society will offer him these things.
Mm-hmm.
No questions asked, and he feels entitled to it.
Yeah. Just even with the cab driver, ripping the $100 bill. Like if you like your tax, right?
Fucking Chad move, dude. Chad move.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that in real life.
That's such a thing.
Dude, you want to see a Chad move? I'd look to my lady. She'd be very impressed. Keep it running, guy.
Man, but yeah, I mean, the only other interesting thing I thought about is like a lot of controversy with the movie. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Before I get into like the controversy, like with that, because I was going to spill into the music. Is there anything else about like the plot or like subtext you wanted to get into about?
I think we've generally covered most of like the themes of the movie and how they manifest in the movie. I mean, granted, you could talk about Eyes Wide Shut and pick it apart just like you could any Kubrick movie for hours. It's the hardest part about like talking about a Kubrick movie is to do it coherently.
Yeah.
Because your mind just starts making connections like all over the place. Like you just see these different things and you're just like, oh, this is how this connects to this. So it kind of forces you to jump around a lot. But I do think we did a pretty good rundown so far of just kind of the basics of the theme and stuff like that. Because there's a bunch of like little interesting tidbits about production that would be fun to talk about, and like you said, the music and the choices. I know you're going to get into the song titles and stuff probably.
Well, one of them.
One of them, okay. Well, a lot. It's the first time, like I guess Stanley Kubrick just was like feeling cheeky. They said I was watching some documentary about it, and he's like, yeah, they're feeling cheeky, so he would pick song titles that like would mirror what's going on in the movie. What a master!
Yeah. Well, I also read like some articles too where like the music wasn't finalized, like it wasn't his final.
Yeah, they didn't have a final mix on the movie at all. Yeah,
and
which I think since we're wrapping up, kind of like talking about the story stuff and everything, I think if Kubrick had lived longer, this movie is a half hour shorter, and probably more to the point, a little tighter. I think it's like not to say that Kubrick movies don't have their own like kind of pace. He's got a very deliberate way that he makes movies and paces them, even the exciting ones. Even like when you think about Clockwork Orange or Full Metal Jacket, they are kind of unto themselves in terms of pacing.
Yeah.
But this one feels like really pushes the edge. Like, because there's so many things I feel like you could just have tightened up and still probably delivered a more powerful experience.
Mm-hmm.
But unless there was some sort of method to the madness in terms of like making you sit with it to be
The
more
only thing
thoughtful.
the only thing I think about with that, because I did have a note on that, how it didn't feel as like like coherent as like most of them like were, or to the point, like you're saying. And that's if you want to, like, on a meta sense, like, play on that theme of daydream, or the dream story of
Mhm.
be kind of in a daze, in and out, and just
And
kind of.
I do think that's part of it. I think that's there. I mean, just from a technical level, in the movie there's tons of dissolves. There's kind of a
Mhm.
floatiness to the camera at times. He would often use
Like,
for scene.
an example of that is when Kidman's character, gets introduced by the Hungarian. He says, "I want to dance," and then dissolves and goes back into that, and then you're just like, "Well, if they've been dancing for hours, did they just start?" Like, you don't really know, but like,
Yeah,
she acts way more like intoxicated than she was, a second ago before the dissolve when she was talking.
yeah, and
And
she's like being adventurous, right?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, that was interesting.
Actually, you know what's interesting? That scene, there's a facsimile of that scene in the book, except it's not the wife. The wife is way less involved in the book.
Yeah,
Kidman actually gets like what feels like a more complete arc. Like she feels more like a real character, whereas Schlitzner was obviously like kind of just dealing with things from his perspective.
yeah.
Uh, Kubrick seems a little bit more generous, and maybe that was because of the time they took to make the movie, and they developed it together kind of as they were shooting it. Which this movie's got it has a Guinness record for being the longest continuous shoot ever,
No kidding.
15 months.
That's
And in an unprecedented move, uh, Kidman and Cruise signed an open-ended contract that they would only be released when Stanley Kubrick said they were done. So they had to move to England.
Yeah, and and props to Kubrick there, because if no one told you, like, it wasn't filmed in New York, like, would you even known? So
Only because I've seen it so many times. Like I have seen this. It's a weird thing. Like it only make the movie really only resonates with me now. Because I feel like this with so many Kubrick movies, we come back and we revisit them as older. Like I just didn't have enough road behind me to really understand or even grapple, even on a basic level with some of the stuff. Like, so when you're 20 watching Eyes Wide Shut, what the fuck do you know about Eyes Wide Shut? Like, what the fuck do you know about what they're talking about? You just
right,
don't. So what you do is you focus on the occult stuff, like, this creepy occult stuff. Like that's what the movie becomes about. And now that I'm an older man,
there's
man,
no. Yeah.
now all I think about is the relationship stuff. Like the occult stuff is like not even interesting to me anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. So I wasn't Vanessa point out, like, Kidman's character, like with the exception of the opening and the end scene, the only times you see her is when she's in bed waiting for Cruz to come back, or in Cruz's mind being, like, with the sailor, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I did point out that, like, well, she did have like that math scene, and I think that with her daughter was just teaching her math, but there was like, I don't, that was somewhere in between as well. But mostly throughout the film, through the duration of going down the rainbow, the path of the rainbow, like, she's in bed, or he's envisioning her in bed with somebody else.
Yeah, and I
So
and I and I think because like I think it's a matter of POV, like who's the movie actually following. But I think it's insightful, it's instructive to notice like who gets the final line. Not only does she get the final line in the movie, she sets the terms.
hmm
Cruz's character is destroyed, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it. He's come clean. She is in the power position, like, and she's not really letting him off.
yeah, because
Because
he
and
goes
he's
to
asking her. He's asking her. He's like, "What do we do? What are we
mm,
gonna do?" Which ends up her like whether it depends on your reading of the movie, I suppose. It's either affirming or self-destructive, I suppose. I like this time watching it, um, with eyes wide open. I think like I found it to be more of an affirming thing. I found it to be slightly more positive because it was this idea that like, well, now you know each other's dirtiness, your
mm,
secrets. your primal desires, what you want from each other, physically, emotionally. Now you've tapped into something deeper with each other. And like I said, I don't think making love and fucking are mutually exclusive. I don't think like fucking is necessarily an emotionless experience. I do think it's different.
Yeah.
You know.
What? Less.
not to spill too much tea, everybody, but like sometimes you just gotta fuck.
Yeah.
I'll say that. He won't. I got it. I got you, buddy.
Yeah. Dmitry Shostakovich wrote Waltz Number 2.
Okay.
Prominent thing going through there. So it was part of an ensemble of a bunch of different like infused like jazz, classical music that was composed in 38, and a lot of that music was when World War II broke out. It was written off as a quote unquote like a Jewish filth, and it actually has a cool story where it was like some people. Long story short, they found someone who was going to Austria, and they were able to get it inside a museum to preserve it, and it wasn't resurfaced until 1999. It was rediscovered in 1999 from World War II, rediscovered in 1999, this film was released in 1999. So
yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's like goes to like Kubrick's kind of the depth of Kubrick. Like you were just saying, like this Jewish thing was considered filth. That's why it was lost. Well, Arthur Schlitzner is an Austrian Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Actually, very like I said in the beginning, he's very controversial at the time. But you know who hated him the most? Adolf Hitler. He was on his list of degenerates, on his list of like banned books in Germany, apparently.
Yep.
So that's another one of these things where Kubrick adds these fucking layers that don't even need to be there, but he does it anyways because he's that thoughtful, like he's that like much,
right? And that waltz is considered a neo-romanticism,
which I loved. I actually love that piece of music too. Yeah. I've used that a few times in like sketches in the past because I think it's funny to use it, but I do sincerely love the soundtrack to Eyes Wide Shut. It's awesome. Even the Chris Isaac song is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. But and it's a little late too. Room 287. But Dmitry Shostakovich was a prominent, a communist member as well. And he's also been criticized. Well renowned like player, but he's also been criticized for being like anti-Semite as well. Which is also interesting. But there's just kind of like Russian overtones, and then granted, Kidman's temptation was self-described as Hungarian, but Milic, he was Russian, and I was looking for other Russian influences throughout the film, but I didn't get enough rewatches to pick up anything on that. But I'm just I don't know. I bet you it's there. I bet you it's there.
When we rewatch all these in like 5 years, we'll do this again. See where we stand in 5 years from now.
Yeah, but but regardless, that was a little out there. But I just really thought that was really interesting.
That's because and
then that's how it got salvaged was through a student going to Austria, and then the Waltz Number 2 was rediscovered. The sheet music for it was rediscovered in 1999 when this film was released. So
that's pretty crazy, huh?
Was he just being cheeky and big? Let me pick this, or I just don't think that's how he was. So,
I know. I think he just is too meticulous for that. Like to disregard that. Like it's a cheeky reference. It is a cheeky reference because he's just because of who Schlitzner was.
Him being cheeky is really methodical.
Well, because it doesn't matter if you know that or not. No, it doesn't. But it's like this idea where he just was from the ground up. Everything matters. Everything fucking matters. Like, you might not like his movies or whatever, but you can respect the idea that everything was thoughtful. Right. Everything means something to Kubrick. Whether it means something to you or not doesn't matter. And that's what makes a good filmmaker. That's what makes somebody that's worth watching. Somebody that has those kind of idiosyncrasies and doesn't give a fuck if you like his movie. Doesn't give a fuck. He's not trying to appeal to anybody. He's trying to make the movie that he wants to make. Like, and I love that about Kubrick.
Right, and it's just so thorough, and it's just like it could be whatever movie you want. You have my surface layer. You can take what you want on the surface, but if you want to dig deep, I have something for you. I have something for you, even down to the score, right?
That's what I
Because
mean. Like, at every layer.
Jacket, right? Like every single song he wrote was like within that period, was within that time period. He didn't use anything outside of that of the Vietnam era. That is, like, it's just went there. It's just crazy, man, just crazy. But again, like I think I thought it was like a great film in terms of like how, like, what we appreciate about Kubrick. It definitely plays into everything that he talks about. Like you said earlier, with the power structures, human condition, blah 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 blah. Was my favorite. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Kubrick film, but glad I actually watched this time, not fast forward to Kidman's butt.
I know. Because when this movie came up, we were like 13, 14. And I remember like all the marketing. I remember seeing like the tabloids. Because, fun fact, the tabloids got screenshots or shots from the set before the movie came out. And the Inquirer, I believe, published it as a leaked sex tape. Because they were just like, oh, look at this. Because nobody knew. Because, they were very secretive about what they were doing, what they were making. Nobody knew what the fuck was going on. They didn't actually publish the pictures as being like, these are screenshots from Eyes Wide Shut. They were like, no, this is like secret sex footage of Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise. Because there's
Pop couple at the time too.
I mean, there's a meta layer to the movie that probably doesn't resonate as strongly today as it would have in 1999, but they were a real life couple. And from what I understand, like it's probably ruined their marriage, at least to a certain degree. But yeah, so you kind of like, so people when they saw this movie back in the day would kind of bring in their perceptions of who they were, and I think Kubrick did that on purpose because he cast Tom Cruise first, and then he was just like, oh, we should have Nicole do it too. She's a great actress, and but apparently they worked together for 15 months. They went very deep hard in the paint, just in terms of conversation. These very like honest conversations about like, marriage and what it means, and like, and fantasies and desire and blah blah blah. All the stupid talk, this girly talk.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently they would go into that stuff very deeply to try to find the truth in the scenes and the characters, and I think like the movie, like I think Kubrick understood what the movie was way more than the actors did. Which I think is most apparent probably in Tom Cruise's performance. And like, which is kind of Kubrick tradition. Like he always picks an actor to kind of fuck with. Most obvious example is Shelley Duvall in The Shining, because we actually have seen like behind the scene footage of him like berating her, being a complete asshole, trying to make her unnerved, trying to make her a fucking mess. Apparently, he did that to Cruise for like a year.
No kidding.
He would not let Cruise watch dailies, so Cruise never got to see his own performance. We would make him do stupid, mundane things like 100 times, trying to make him feel anxiety. The Kidman fantasy scene, which obviously they had the film, right? Wouldn't let him in. Wouldn't let him be spoken to about him. Wouldn't let him see the footage until he saw it when the movie came out.
Wow.
Yeah, like so all these layers just to fuck with Cruise. Cruise developed an ulcer and had to take like a month off because he was so stressed out from like, because he's just like, why can't I get it? Like, what do you want from me? And Kubrick was just like, well, I'll know when I see it. Let's just do it again. So like, there's a famous story that he had to walk through a door 100 times, which was famously, it's been confirmed by a lot of people. I don't know if that's the legend of Kubrick or whatever. But yeah, he would do things like that to him on a regular basis. Like there's a scene where he's walking down the street when he gets really frustrated and he's like fucking punching his own hand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that scene?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a brief moment. He did that like a few hundred times. Just kept making him do it. Just to try to drag him down as far as he could. But on the inverse, you know what he did with Nicole Kidman? He was like a granddad. Very
Uh,
warm, understanding, nurturing, let her come into his office, read his like materials about like what he had been studying to make the movie, but he would not let Tom Cruise do any of that.
oh, you can watch the dailies. Here you go.
Yeah, yeah. And Tom Cruise, because if you're an actor and you're trying to get a sense of where you're at, like what performance are you creating, you might
Right.
want to see what you're doing.
Yeah.
That you might want to, so you can kind of like adjust.
Right.
But Kubrick was just not interested in that at all. Nope.
Master. The master.
Famously, Harvey Keitel, after like a week or two of filming, walked off the set. Harvey Keitel was the Sidney Pollack character, Ziegler,
No kidding. I
which
know.
I think, honestly, I think they kind of, it's better with Sidney Pollack because he's more like benign. I think if it was Harvey Keitel, you would read menace into that character.
Right.
Like you just be like, oh, Harvey Keitel is being fucking intense and being like evil.
Yeah, but with Pollock, when he tells him the whole, like, oh, Nick is back in Seattle banging Mrs. Nick, and, well, she's a druggie. She's a druggie. Like,
Well,
yeah,
here's the thing though with
it,
Pollock.
it felt more like easy to believe that, like, from him than it would have been from, I
Yes.
feel. Like,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And the thing is though, but you still don't know. You're like, is he telling the truth?
right.
But there is at least the sense of doubt. If it was fucking Harvey Keitel, you'd be like, no, dude, he's lying. He's lying.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's all sorts of like weird parallels with like Sidney Pollack and what he does on the pool table versus what happens during the ceremony with
Oh,
the red cloak guy pounding on like doing the tapping.
yeah, he does it with the piece of chalk, then he does it with a ball, and then, yeah. And then with the glass of scotch when he puts that down again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
so which is like too many times to be an accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Kubrick again, like working subconsciously on you, like a little bit, like trying to do another echo. Like, you've seen the kind of the pageantry version. Now we're gonna reveal something to you for real. And this is we kind of understand on a subconscious level that the guy who has the power, the guy who knocks, because we
Right.
saw that scene, is extended to Sidney Pollack's character. It's almost like a fucking like a Pavlov's dog thing, where it's like makes Cruz submissive,
Right.
where it quells his fears because he does the tapping thing. It's interesting. I actually just thought of that. I was like, oh, that's another interesting layer. I could be reading into that, but I suggest no.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say
Well,
it's there.
so how many people did he tap? How many before they stopped showing them tapping the staff in front of the hookers?
See, that would be interesting because we got to count the taps.
Yeah, did that count that line up with what he did on the pool table? So again, layers, great layers. Or it might be nothing, but I mean, probably something though.
Another interesting factoid: the mask that Tom Cruise wears is the face of Ryan O'Neal from Barry Lyndon.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
And also, the guy who plays the Red Cloak is Leon Vitali, Lord Bullingdon himself.
No. But was he like supposed to be getting coffee for Kubrick out there or
something? Well, yeah. This is when this is long after he became Kubrick's assistant, but and he was probably just so excited to be throwing scraps because he was an assistant on 3 movies. So in between Barry Lyndon, he did The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. But he still lived and like worked for him for all the time in between.
Right.
There's this lost period of, because this was like 12 years. This came out 12 years after Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
And a lot of that was because Kubrick would go down kind of dead ends. He was working on his Holocaust movie called The Aryan Papers, and apparently Spielberg kind of scooped it out from under him. Mm-hmm. And did Schindler's List. So he's like, what's the point? Also, actually, he had kind of a negative note for Schindler's List. He talked a little shit about Schindler's List. He was like, what Schindler's List gets wrong is because it ends up being about hope when the Holocaust is all about failure.
Right.
And then And also, he was developing the film AI, which they did make after posthumously.
Right.
Spielberg directed it. But apparently, as they say in documentaries and stuff, that he had tapped Spielberg to direct it. He wanted Spielberg to direct it because he had enough self-awareness to know that he's like, I am too cold and philosophical. I need some like Amblin, some ET warmth to it.
You need someone that can make a positive Holocaust story. Do this one. That's what.
No,
Hey.
not to do Schindler's List. No, to do to do AI. Have you ever seen AI?
Long time ago.
Well, I think like when we cap off the Kubrick series, we should probably end with his unofficial last movie, which is AI. Because it's interesting to see like a Kubrick movie directed by Steven Spielberg. Because we all know Steven Spielberg. You know, he did like the Indiana Jones movies, E.T. He has kind of a warmth to the way he presents material. And as the legend goes, as they say that Kubrick wanted Spielberg actually to direct that movie because he felt like he would be too clinical, and it just wouldn't. You needed to connect with the AI little boy, and he's like, I don't think I can achieve that. I don't know if I can do that, which is probably true. Actually, honestly, I'd much rather have seen Kubrick's AI. I think it would have been probably just more interesting intellectually, but
we wouldn't have had a Gigolo Joe if Kubrick.
No, Gigolo Joe was in the original script.
Was he really? Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, like all the things are there, and then you get the Spielberg version, which is more schmaltzy. It's like cheesy.
Right.
So when you watch AI, like I don't know, it's been such a long time since I watched it, but some of it works, some of it doesn't. But but you can feel Kubrick trying to push his way through Spielberg, and Spielberg kind of fighting with that. Because Spielberg's sensibilities are way more populist. He's way more of like a crowd pleaser kind of director.
Yeah.
Like he wants you to feel good at the end of the story. He wants you to feel good while you're watching. He wants you to connect with people. Whereas Kubrick is just like, no, this is an interesting book and it has a lot of interesting ideas. I'm going to try to present the ideas on the screen. Even if at the cost of character, at the cost of connecting with things. Like I cannot think of a movie.
It's cost of making you feel uncomfortable too. As the artist, I mean, it's
well now that okay, so we've watched the bulk of Kubrick's work at this point.
Right.
The only ones we haven't watched is Paths of Glory, Lolita, and Fear and Desire. Which Fear and Desire is like almost like a student movie. It's like 60 minutes long. So like, is there like, so we've seen like kind of the bulk of his studio work. Other than also The Killers. We haven't watched The Killers. But we've watched the bulk of his studio work. Is there one that sticks out in your mind so far that you feel like you've connected with? Have you ever been able to connect with a Kubrick character other than Jack Torrance because you're a psycho?
No. No. For reasons I won't get into though, but yeah, totally Barry Lyndon. 100%.
That's the closest you can connect to is Barry Lyndon. I'm going full Jack Torrance. Jack Torrance. I even got the sweater for it, kids.
Oh, I saw. I love that sweater. That
was my wife. Very thoughtful Christmas gift.
Launchpad player. Launchpad.
Yeah, we're going to the moon, everybody.
That's right.
Actually, we're not. Trick question. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist, bitches. Apollo 11 is a fraud. Anyways,
I'm down.
So, what do you have like a favorite so far of what we've seen? Because we're almost at the end of the road. I'm gonna probably make you watch Lolita at some point, but
yeah, I don't know. I knew that was going to come up, and I'm like,
I think if you trust Kubrick,
I do.
You trust him to do something different with that material.
Yeah.
Then I think you should watch it.
All right. No, we'll give it a go. So Lolita is next.
We can do Lolita or Paths of Glory. Or The Killing. Or the Killing. The Killing is his first like studio movie, or his first full feature-length movie. It's a conventional movie. It's very good, but it's like just a heist movie. It's really good though. It's called The Killing. So we could do The Killing, the Paths of Glory or Lolita
Mm.
for our next Kubrick thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk offline about that.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So it'll be a mystery. But I think we're probably going to do something.
It will be.
What's the password? What's the password?
Yeah.
What's the
Fidelio.
password?
Fidelio is the password, right?
Ah, dude, it's Zoobox.
Dude, I thought we were still doing the thing. I thought we were
Ah, shit.
Fidelio.
Paul's like, I've been jerking off for no reason, for nothing.
Yeah. Which funny, the password they get into that orgy was a Beethoven opera about a
Beethoven
faithful wife.
opera. Yeah.
About a faithful wife. So yeah, how
Yeah.
about that? Layers, man.
Also,
Layers.
just literally translate to like fidelity or monogamy.
Yeah. Yeah. So
What a scamp. What a scamp this Kubrick is, huh?
Kubrick is the master. Kubrick is the master.
Well, it's like it is such a joy to like investigate his movies just because like you said, like you can just no matter how far you go, you can find a meaningful connection. And that's really unique. You know, most movies you really can't do that with.
There's not a lot there.
I mean, like the only other people I would say, like maybe like the Coen brothers, maybe Alfred Hitchcock, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the Coen brothers. I mean, that's all they're all about. It's like kind of dramatic irony and just layering things upon layering things. And the more you know about something, or more you know about a time period or whatever, the more you get out of it. The more you understand what they're referencing, the more you get out of it. It's like when you watch The Big Lebowski. Like if you understand that they're like kind of referencing these old detective novels, like you get more out of it. Like that's cool. Like when you have like filmmakers that actually inspire you to be a smarter person. It's like go investigate, find something else, go a little bit deeper into our stuff, you know? Because most of the time we watch movies, we watch popular cinema, we watch fucking garbage.
And they'll have like those things like Easter eggs. Oh, there's some Easter eggs there, but it's not the same as like what Kubrick does. So
No, because the whole movie is an Easter egg. Like the whole thing is this thing to be discovered, and like every single thought you have about it is credible until proven otherwise. You know,
exactly.
and it's cool, and that's what's cool about his approach to filmmaking because it does, like I've said, it has this kind of cold, clinical, distant feel to it a lot of times. And in fairness, I think with Eyes Wide Shut, it could hurt that movie. It kind of can hurt that movie. I think if you liked those characters more, that movie is way more impactful. I think like it would just drive home, like instead of just being a purely intellectual exercise where I feel like I've read a piece of philosophy or something. Like it would maybe actually driven home some like really pull at your heartstrings, but it never tries to do that. So I don't hold that against the movie because it's obviously not the aim of the movie, but it could have used a little warmth in certain respects, in my opinion. I think you could have. I think it's also a little too slavish to the novel. I think we could have blown it up a little bit. I don't know.
Well, that depends, right? Because what's the novel about, and like what was the main thing with Kubrick's film about, right? I mean, he chose this out he sought it out for a reason, and they did have their reputation. They new atmosphere. You know, they moved 100 years ahead of its time and the setting, but the overall themes remain the same.
Yeah.
So it goes into like, what did you want to get out of it? And if like in terms of like some warmth in the characters, like were we supposed to like?
Well, yeah, because you could say the book itself is not warm. It's not. It's the same thing. It's an intellectual enterprise. Same thing with the Clockwork Orange. Same thing with Barry Lyndon to a certain degree because it's just more descriptive than kind of intimate.
It's like a Clockwork Orange, right? Like where it had like the comedic like overtones, right? With some very like heavy material, right? In this case, we had like some thriller aspects, some thriller music and filming techniques for some very mundane and as well. So where you're trying to make a thriller out of something that's mundane that happens in a lot of people's lives. Not the secret orgies. That's not what I'm referring to.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I'm just talking about the struggles of like going into a rut, and making that like into a thriller. So like with that cold perspective of just like observing. So I don't know. But that's the great part about all this stuff is because like, well, where was that going? Where is that going?
Yeah,
So
for sure, 100%. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rundown of Eyes Wide Shut.
yeah.
Not my favorite Kubrick film at all. But actually, I kind of even like enjoy it more, just talking about it. Honestly, I
Yeah.
was colder on the movie coming into this conversation than I am leaving it, and I think that's what's great about movies like this, and what movies like was filmmakers like Kubrick. It's like part of the fun, which is not. This is an anathema to most moviegoers. Like you can watch a movie and have a relatively unpleasant experience, with that being the point, and kind of like have really interesting things to think about and say about it.
Yeah.
And that's the point of the movie, rather than this idea that like, oh, you're going to like just like traditionally enjoy a movie. Like that's not what the aim is. And
Right.
yeah. Yeah, it's really a really fucking weird thing. It's really weird.
Yeah,
I
man.
love it. I love it though. I love it though.
The very first one you invited me on, man, was Greasy Strangler, man.
The Greasy Strangler. The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I know, but I love talking about it and watching it. I love talking.
Which yeah, next time we do this, we gotta find a weird one. You wanted to find a weird one, don't you?
Yeah, I did.
All right, we're gonna offline. We will investigate. We'll try to figure out a weird one. Because they're out there. They're out there.
If you look, you'll find something.
Oh, I'll find some. I can find some. Oh, dude, it's not hard to find one.
Yeah. It's just the last Eyes Wide Shut thing, just like the references to the rainbow, right? The two models party, which goes to the end of the rainbow, and the clothing store, it's the rainbow. Like when you follow the end of the rainbow, like what's there, right? And it's very broad and can be very dark. And like you said, trying to find weird stuff online, man. The end of the rainbow can mean a lot of different things.
I mean, it gets a little bit harder nowadays in the censorious world we live in. So I do.
Yeah.
If people don't know,
Lucky Charms and a funnel, and yeah, well, I'll leave it there for the
well,
kids.
if people don't know, if you're a person that's only interested in like movie content, every Monday night I do a live stream where I try to find like kind of weird stuff to look at and talk about. Okay, the current era we live in, the censorious kind of prudish era we live in, it's actually kind of hard to find that stuff. It's not like readily given to you like it used to be back in the golden age of like 2015, 2014. You can find the wildest shit. Like there's just a plethora of content. And nowadays, I'm just like trying to find a MGTOW interview and it's hard. Like they're not there anymore because they've been taken off the internet. They've been obliterated from things like YouTube. So, it's not as easy as Paul is trying to tell you. He's going to task me with finding a weird movie and it's gonna go wrong. It's gonna go bad. Yeah. But
it always does.
Anyways, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for talking to me about this movie. I appreciate it. Two knocks to you. And we will see you guys again another time. Good night, goodbye, and good luck. I'm gonna fuck your wife.